Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Roger Ciarleglio, who is Senior VP of Sales, North America at Alemica. And today we're going to talk about digital transformation, why it's not an easy button. Now, there's a lot of discussion, today about digital transformation and why it's important and its benefits. And it would be great if there was kind of an easy button that you could just, press and be kind of instantly digitally transformed and have all the visibility, that you need and want. But the reality is that there are many factors that go into, making digital transformation a reality. Well, what are some of those, critical success factors? And, what have been some of the benefits that companies that have been on this digital transformation journey, achieving to date? Well, those are just some of the questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to, have Roger on board here to kind of share his perspective and insights and advice, based on his work with clients and prospects in the industry. So, Roger, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Adrian. I look forward to the discussion.
So, Roger, you're a first-time guest. We've had many of your colleagues from Alemica on the program, but this is the first time for you. So I always like to kind of, when I bring someone new in the program, just kind of get a sense of how and why they got involved in this crazy industry to, begin with. And so why don't we start there before we dive into kind of this digital transformation topic and, share a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Alemica.
Sure. Great, Adrian. So my whole career has been spent working for ERP companies. I've worked for some of the big guys like Oracle, Infor, and Epicor, and in various different management and executive roles. But as you might know, that when you're dealing with ERP, I was selling to manufacturers and distributors, and their core competencies are, managing inventory, managing the supply chain, and logistics associated with that. So for over 30 years, I've been dealing with supply chain. In my role now at Alemica, I'm the Senior VP that runs North America. And for those that don't know Alemica, we provide supply chain automation and visibility solutions in the cloud.
Yeah, no, great. Certainly a lot has changed in the enterprise software market over the past, 30 years. I've been at it for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of change. And, certainly when you look at, the types of solutions that are out there right now, when you look at something like an ERP, right, which has its role in the enterprise. But now when you're talking about supply chain and distributed networks and, some of these cross-enterprise, processes, that's what we're seeing, a lot of the network-based solution providers kind of playing a key role in helping to facilitate, those processes. So never a dull moment in this industry,
No.
for sure. So let's get into the topic now. I mean, everyone, like I said in my opening comments, everyone seems to be talking about digital transformation these days. So why don't we start with a basic question? How do you define, digital transformation? And from your perspective, where are most companies today on this journey?
Well, the way I define it, Adrian, is you're basically trying to automate both your internal and your external business partners for your major key processes like buying product, selling product, moving product as examples. And you're trying to get out of it is all the manual effort, right? And all the paper. So you're trying to get everything digitized. That's why I guess we call it digital transformation, right? So that's kind of what you're trying to do it. And by it being digitized, it means everything's happening in real time, right? So you can respond quickly. And of course, ultimately, you want it to have that easy button, as you pointed out earlier, to see real-time statuses of orders and shipments and inventory. And that's the goal, right? Where most companies are in that journey, quite honestly, some of them are just formulating strategies. A few of them have started on the journey, but they're really just beginning. When I look at how automated or digitized most of the companies I talk to are, even the ones that started, they're probably maybe 15 to 20% of the way there. And typically what they've got is a lot of things they've been working on for a long time, like old EDI connections with partners or portal connections and some automation in the processes, but they've still got a long way to go. A few have implemented some software like control towers or BI systems, but they're all struggling with those because they don't have the right data to feed those great reporting tools.
Right. I want to get into that a little bit, a little bit later. But it's a great point. I mean, I think I see the same thing. I mean, I think many companies, even some of the big companies that big brand name companies, are really at the early stages, of this journey. And I mean, one of the things I find is a lot of companies say, "Well, what is digital transformation? Haven't we been doing this for a long time already? I mean, the internet's not new. We've been on the internet for a long time, and we've been exchanging, electronic data, via EDI and so forth. So why all the buzz and hype?" And I say, well, I think if you take a step back and you look at some of your processes, you realize that there's still a lot of manual processing taking place. There's still a lot of paper in a lot of these, processes where there's physical paper that's being handed from, one entity to another. And then you have someone that's keying in that information. You still have people that are, going from one screen and they're typing information and then they swivel in their chair and go to another computer system and then retype that information into another, system. So there's a lot of waste. It's still in a lot of these processes, a lot of paper, based in these processes. And that's what, I kind of have the same, definition. It's really getting a lot of the manual processes and a lot of the paper-based processes out of your system, out of your processes, is part of what we're talking about here, as well as trying to find where those, areas of waste and trying to eliminate those areas of waste and then trying to automate, as much as possible, some of these things that are less, that should be automated, quite frankly.
Right. Some lean thinking, right?
Exactly. So when you talk to, your customers and some of the prospects, I mean, what ultimately are they trying to achieve with digital transformation? What are some of the, driving forces behind it?
Well, I think the kind of nirvana of where they're trying to get is a real-time dashboard that shows status of their supply chain, where they can see just alerts and exceptions. And frankly, they want it to be predictive as opposed to reactive, right? And today, first of all, none of them really have that kind of a dashboard. And most of the data they're looking at is old, and it's after the fact reporting. There's nothing to alert them. I always tell folks, you look at ERPs, and when somebody enters an order, they promise a delivery date. The ERP system loses sight of the delivery once it ships, and it goes into a black hole. And when they find out that there's a problem is when the customer calls them up and says, "Where's my stuff? It didn't come today."
Right. Yeah. No. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of, interest today on, these real-time freight visibility solutions, so that you can try to, bridge that gap or shed some light into, this black hole that, that you're talking about. And, I think what you're seeing is, I see the same thing. I think when you look back to things like, dashboards and visibility dashboards and all that, historically, a lot of it has been, backward looking, right, or reporting based. But really with the everything that's going on in industries today in terms of customer expectations, in terms of, customers wanting visibility to what's happening in real time, right? And then the ability to, manage inventory more effectively, manage labor more effectively, and so forth. I mean, all this has to happen on a much more real-time basis than it has been in the past. So I'm hearing the same thing from, a lot of the, a lot of the companies that I talk to. Like I kind of mentioned in my opening comments, I think it would be easy, or I think that the dream would be to kind of have some kind of easy button that you can, plug in like a USB into your systems and, be able to have instantaneously, this type of visibility that you're talking about. But there's a lot of work, when you start peeling back the onion and, and a lot of factors that go into making, digital, transformation, supply chain visibility a reality. So what are some of the keys to success and common pitfalls that companies should avoid in this area?
Sure, Adrian. Well, if you look at the keys to success, I think the first thing is this is not an IT project. People hear the word digital and they think computers and IT. And as a matter of fact, in many of the clients I call on, the digital transformation project, the head is either the CIO or somebody in IT. And the reality is it's got to be a joint business/IT project, because the business is the one that's got to figure out what is the ultimate business process and what do we need to do to transform it. And IT can help them get there. And because it's truly transformational, Adrian, I think it's critical that there's some executive sponsorship. It can't just be something, okay, I'm delegating this to you, Mr. CIO, and now you've got to get it done. And I think another common pitfall is the approach to, well, how do I start it and how do I get it there? Well, the first thing you've got to do is create the process and the digital record that you're going to communicate with all the parties in your supply chain. And once you establish the digital record, you've got to connect to the partners. And in today's world, as I indicated before, it's usually 15 to 20% of your partners are connected. There are now technologies that will allow you to connect to thousands of partners, various different ways based on the capabilities of the partner and the volumes of business you're doing with the partner. And then last but not least, then you go to the control towers and the dashboards. Now that the data is there and you've got it, when you look at the common pitfalls, Adrian, it starts right with the concept of, people see that Nirvana is the end game, is the dashboard. So they go out and buy the dashboard and mystically think it's going to work for them. And what they forget is the old axiom in computers: garbage in equals garbage out. So now they have this beautiful, very easy to use dashboard that's given them all the wrong data, because the key is the data. And in order to get the right data, you really have to do two things. You've got to connect to all of your key partners. And when I say partners in the supply chain, I mean customers, suppliers, and logistics providers. All of them, as many of them as possible, need to be connected. But the other thing that most folks overlook is that the data has got to be linked between all the transactions. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. The best example is your typical order to cash scenario, right? A client wants to buy a product from your company. They send you a purchase order, and they track everything by their purchase order number. You create a sales order, and if you're doing this digitally, you might automatically create that sales order in your ERP system, and you track everything by the sales order, and you may give that to your customers so they can have both, but their systems can't do much with it. But then it gets even worse, because now I go to my logistics department and I tell them we need to ship this stuff, and they book a transportation order, which is yet another key on this transaction that is usually never linked to the sales order, and the customer has no idea what that number is, right? So that has to be linked. And then once the transportation provider decides, well, I'm going to put it on this truck, they have a license plate that it needs to be tracked to that truck, or if it's ocean, a vessel number, right? Because in today's world of digital, we're going to get GPS statuses from that truck and from that ship, or whatever way you're shipping it. It could be a rail car. And my customer service folks want to tell their clients, what's the status of the shipment? Where is it? and they want to know if there's going to be a problem. And if you don't link all those things together, you can't possibly give an answer. And what's happening in the real world today is the customer service rep knows when they shipped it, it's in their ERP, but then they have to call logistics and somebody's got to manually look it up, or they got to go to the carrier's portal and they got to manually look it up, and they're still not getting GPS signals. So it's a very critical piece, is both the connections and the data linking.
You know, those are two great points, because one of the things that I talked about, I always come up with my predictions for the coming year, and I write those up in December. And I think last December, one of my predictions for 2018 was that companies were going to start paying more attention to what I call the long tail of their supply chains, in terms of being able to better communicate and collaborate and link with that, right? Because I think you're right. I mean, a lot of companies historically, they took the 80-20 rule, which was like, hey, you know what, we're going to connect only with the 20% of our trading partners that represent 80% of our transactions, right? Because, trying to connect with everybody historically was very expensive, very time consuming, trying to do EDI with everybody. It just wasn't workable. So that was kind of the Band-Aid solution. Hey, let's just do the 20%. Well, that might have worked okay, 15, 20 years ago. But to your point today, you really need to, get those feeds, get that data from as many of your trading partners as possible. And the technologies today to do that, you've got, things like, APIs and smart email and so many different types of technology available today that are more, kind of open the door to do that, more successfully. And I think the other point that you brought up, I think is critical too, which is, a lot of, getting all the data and aggregating the data is one thing, but you do have to create those linkages, because I think that was a great example, because you can see just in one transaction, one order, there's an order, there's a purchase order, there's a sales order, there's a, bill of lading, there's a vehicle number, ultimately there's an invoice that gets cut, and all those things have different numbers, and different people in the supply chain have different ways that they want to slice and dice, the information and track it. And in order to be able to see that end-to-end history of what happened, it's not enough just to bring the data into, a common database, if you will, or a common, platform. You ultimately have to make those, connections, which takes a lot of work,
Yep. And well, one of the things you got to realize is one of the reasons most of these customers are being driven to digital transformation is what I call the Amazon effect, right? They various board members and executives have noticed that Amazon through the internet has made it easy to order and track what you've ordered, track shipments, know when it's coming, and very quick and reliably get that information, right? And they're saying and they recognize that that's dramatically affected the retail industry, right? And so, they're saying to their companies and their executives, so what are we doing to be more competitive? What are we doing like Amazon did? What are we doing to get into new markets or get new channels? And so they're recognizing they got to digitize.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of this thing, the discussion around the Amazon effect, I mean, I think it's, tempting to say, well, that's just, B2C, business to consumer, and what's happening there. But the reality is that a lot of those things are happening in the B2B world as well, because we're all not only consumers, but we also exist in the B2B world. And I know I hear it from folks as well, but they give another example, and they say, hey, I can go on my phone and I can see an Uber driver. I can see the license plate of that Uber driver. I can see their ETA in terms of getting to me, and I can track it on my phone. Why can't we do something like that, with our, with our shipments, right? Or why can't I just pull up my phone and get a real time, view of all the information I need to have, so I can make, smarter and faster, decisions. My next question, I think you probably touched upon a little bit already. I mean, because I think one of the things sometimes happens is that people kind of equate, digital transformation with perhaps what they've been doing already with business intelligence. I mean, is there a difference between the two? You kind of is BI part of digital transformation? Is it different? I mean, what are the differences there?
Well, I really look at BI as dramatically different, quite honestly, Adrian. If you really look at BI is after the fact reporting and analysis. And I'm not saying that's not good stuff because it is, but typically the way folks have implemented BI is they've used the old ETL approach of extract, transform, and load into a separate database or cube the information. But now the data is only as updated as that database and or cube. And frankly, these things are changing in real time. The example you used, Adrian, of the GPS read from where a truck is, that's changing every 5 seconds or 15 seconds. And BI is not designed to work that way. It's also not at all transformational in terms of how are we making our business on the actual processes less manual and more digitized. So digital transformation to me is dramatically different because it's looking at the process, not just the after the fact reporting, and it's real time. Dramatically different. And we're looking to also get into new channels. So it's much more strategic.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just, I think to echo something that you said earlier with regards to digital transformation, you talked about how you need to have executive sponsorship. You also need to bring, it really is a project or an initiative that really to succeed at it truly has to be cross-functional in nature in terms of within the enterprise, right? So it's not, if it's purely an IT project, it's not going to succeed. If it's purely a transportation project, it's not going to succeed, right? If it's purely something that's being driven by customer service, it's not going to succeed. It really needs to bring all of those parties together, to be able to, define what those end-to-end processes are going to be and create that digital model of the end-to-end processes, and then get in the data that you need to then start tracking and start managing that in a much more automated way. And it's the same thing with then bringing in the trading partners that have to be part of this process as well. So it really is a much broader, initiative than just something to put in a BI tool, in place. Can you share with us, some examples of digital transformation in action? I mean, some of the things that perhaps some of your clients are working on that, have already, they've been able to achieve some success and kind of bring them forward on this journey?
Sure. Well, I'll go back to kind of my order to cash example, if you wouldn't mind, Adrian.
Sure.
So, we've got customers that have, first of all, automated the order process. So all the order create and order change happen electronically, no keying into the ERP system, right? And automatic confirmations, advanced ship notices take place. So the clients know exactly the status of what's going on, right? But then to take it further, like I said, we've tied it to logistics where, now they can see where the truck is. The customer service rep that's talking to the client or is monitoring what's going on can be in front of a dashboard and see if there's a problem with one of their orders and see exactly where the shipment is and have a projection on when it will actually arrive. So they can either do something to expedite, or they can at least tell the client, well, here's where it is and what's going to happen, instead of receiving a phone call 3 days later with an irate client on the end. So, we see that. We also see situations in just the whole transportation scenario where they've got RFID or transponders attached to pallets or tankers to tell you where things are or what's the volume of inventory in things to help manage in that whole scenario. So we see a lot of that. One of the latest things that's kind of really critical is a lot of our customers, Adrian, are upgrading their ERP systems, right? So many of them have SAP, and SAP's been telling them to move to S4 HANA. They got to do that. So they're spending all this money and time of effort to move to HANA, and they've been smart enough, some of them, to involve us in their blueprinting sessions to figure out how can we make the processes as automated as possible, and how can we connect to our partners, because generic SAP doesn't do that, and we help them, and we need to be involved at the very beginning, and a number of them have recognized that, are involving us.
Yeah, no, great examples there. So it sounds like, part of it has been kind of doing that linking that you talked about earlier, right? To be able to then have that,
right,
being able to have that visibility end to end from an order through transportation and logistics to final receipt, and having that in a more real-time basis. And then here, I think you brought up another point. I mean, success in a lot of these things really involves integration, because, ultimately you need to integrate with, there are other enterprise systems that have data or information that needs to be brought into as part of the end-to-end process, whether it's an ERP, whether it's a TMS or a WMS, or, you talked a little bit about their even Internet of Things, right? Bringing sensor data and GPS data and all that. So there's so many different data sources, right? And being able to connect with some of these particularly emerging data sources like RFID and IoT, bringing that into the process sounds like it's a critical component of this.
Oh yeah, IoT is especially critical. There's just so much good stuff out there.
Well, Roger, we're getting short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question here. I mean, as a way to kind of, wrap up, I mean, what questions should, companies ask themselves to assess whether, they have the right people and the right capabilities in place to succeed in digital transformation?
So what I've kind of seen as best practices on this, Adrian, is, first of all, I'll go back to one of the things I already said, is this isn't just an IT project, it's business and IT, and it needs executive sponsorship. I think a lot of companies have put together centers of excellence around both supply chain and digital transformation to achieve the results. But I think that one of the biggest things that I've really seen that I think is really important is companies need the freedom to experiment on how they can best do some of their processes and some of the tools they can use. And what that means is they've got to have some latitude in using some budget to test things out. And we've got to kind of drop the whole concept of absolutely having to have a hard ROI around a project, because then you may not even try some new thought that you're not sure of that could be just dramatic change for the business in a positive way. So I mean, I think that freedom is really important. And last but not least, I will point out, you've got to have the ability to connect to all your partners, and you got to have lots of options to do that, because they're all going to need different levels of connection in terms of cost and volume.
Great points. I mean, and just to echo something you just said, I mean, I know whenever I talk to companies that are on this digital transformation journey, and I ask them that question, I mean, what words of advice do you have for others, right? I would say the most common answer I get is just get started, right? Because I think you can, and it sounds, simple and trite, but they said, you know what, you can, the classic analysis paralysis. You can spend all this time, trying to come up with an ROI and just trying to analyze, which direction to go and all that. Next thing you know, 6 months, a year and a half has gone by, and in this environment, you can't afford to kind of, wait that long. And the second thing that I hear from a lot of companies is like, hey, we don't have the appetite, for, these big bang implementations, that take a year or 2 years to implement, cost millions of dollars. They want to be able, to your point, be able to try things at a much more, lower cost, low risk standpoint, things that they can start delivering value and measured in weeks, versus months or years, and then build on those successes. So, well, Roger, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics, but, certainly I think we provided some good food for thought and ideas and advice for companies related to this topic. And certainly appreciate you making the time to be on the program today.
Again, I appreciate you having me, and I thought it was a great conversation, Adrian. Anytime you'd like to discuss more, we'd love to help. So thank you much.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Alemica website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Roger, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.
Thank you.